Okay, morning everybody, to the October 1st meeting of the St. John Road Impact Fee Study Group. Roll call, Dennis and Doug are both going to be absent today. Jack Slager.
Here.
I'm here. Joan McInerney. Here. Tagi Argashi.
Here.
Danny Cobb.
So I can turn my phone off. Here.
Adam Decker.
Here.
Brian Blazik.
Present.
Did I miss anybody? Okay. We will defer approval of the minutes. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Tagi.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
What we have for today is sort of an update of construction costs. We had, you recall that in our last week meeting, we had a couple of boo-boos and so we had to update those, and that update resulted in some changes in the actual trip cost. And so I'm going to share, or Denny's going to share those with you. Denny's also going to talk about the specifics of these costs and activities. So we had a meeting yesterday. These are sort of next step we have to go through, and talking with the town manager, reviewing these, and basically, and then we have had last week, we had some comments from Dennis about the roundabouts and those things. I think Dennis is going to talk about it and sort of clarify some of those issues, and so we will update you on those. We will also discuss the concept of the net fee. Although it's not, you will notice it's not that applicable this year for you because this is a new program. There are other factors that will typically it is considered when a fee is not a new fee. In other words, when this is continued for next round, there are other factors that come in. But nonetheless, it is that net fee has to be determined, and we will go through some examples of the fee calculations. I know we tried in our first presentation to go through that, and it was very difficult, and I think including myself was somewhat frustrated, I know, but I'm almost sure that this time you will, with all of these meetings you have heard, you're familiar with the terms, and we should go through those fairly fast and hopefully have a good conversations around them as we go through that. At the end of this presentation, I'm going to touch on upon some of the fee options, and these, hopefully you will consider these options as in our next meeting, when hopefully, if everything goes okay today, we can move on to a setting the fee session for next week. I'm glad Adam is here. We will. I'm not sure where we ended up last time or last week about setting up the impact fee structure, and and we're gonna hopefully touch that a little bit more this time and answer any questions and hopefully make some decisions. And we will schedule. Right now, we are scheduled for next week, and I've called this final meeting, but it is. We will have to see if it is going to be final meeting. Depends on you naturally today and what we discuss next week. So that's the agenda for today. And as
If
I
I
mentioned,
may, Taggy,
yeah,
if next week is not our last meeting, then I will want to make sure that we're going to have a last meeting before the planning commission meeting, because we must deliver our recommendation to them this month. So that may mean we go outside of our normal schedule, but whatever, we'll see when we get there. And just FYI, I just got a text from Denny. He's watching us, so be good, but he doesn't want to log in because there's a lot of people traffic where he's at, but he is watching and may be texting in questions if he has them.
okay. I was just going to say that sort of update the committee. Yes, we are in addition to the meeting that we had yesterday with Craig. We we are also scheduled on for October 21st to go for briefing of Plan Commission and. And if we can get this finalized, it is theoretically possible that we will go back in November to Plan Commission with your recommendation, and then they will have to approve the resolution and send it to the council, and then hopefully by either late November or early December, we could wrap this thing up, and that's where we are.
Taggy, are you going to brief them at their regular meeting or at their study session?
I understand it is a study session.
Okay, when is their regular meeting? I thought that was the 21st. Briefing was earlier.
Their meetings are always the first one of the month is always the actual meeting. The second one is always the study session.
Right, so that's, okay, I had that backwards then.
I was going to say, you just got them reversed is all.
Yeah.
Yeah, the October 21st, it is a study session.
So we want to be ready by their first meeting in November with the actual recommendation, is that correct?
Theoretically, it is possible if you're ready, yes.
All right, well, we have to be ready.
Yeah, and okay. Very quick process that you have seen this before. We have gone through 4 steps, and this is the 5th and the final step in the assessment process, and that is we have what is the charge per trip. We touched on that last time, and we're going to go over it again this time, and with that with revised numbers, and then we are going to talk about what is the fee for different land uses. Again, this is a reminder for what we are looking for. We are looking for the growth cost, and that is the cost, the difference between total improvement for the next 10 years minus existing deficiencies, and all of our work relates to that. These are the updated tables that you saw last time, we did have, as I mentioned, we did have a little bit of misplaced cost column. The $7 million was placed in existing deficiencies, and so we had to move it, and we had to correct that, and this represents the total roadway improvement costs. These are all, you will notice that these are all growth-related costs, and it's $17,800,000. Denny typically calls these also segment. You may have heard them, and but these are the roadway improvement costs. I want to make sure that Denny, I don't know if he can see it or he can talk about it, is to go over these one more time so everybody understand what these are involved. Denny, can you do that, or?
Yeah.
Okay, great. You want to just quickly run through them and explain that to everybody?
Okay. So the first one is 93rd Avenue from White Oak to 41. And that's a 3-lane section that we're going to be putting in there. And it will butt up against the intersection improvement that will need to be made at US 41, which actually goes from US 41 west to just past Klein. The next one is 93rd from Klein to Blaine. It's roundabout at Klein, which is an existing deficiency, but be a single lane. And so now with the 10-year growth, we'll need to widen that to a dual lane approach. And then we'll have 4 lanes between Klein and Blaine, a traffic signal at Blaine, and that's Calumet Avenue from 101st to the south town limits, starting at the south town limits and going north up to 101st, we'll have a 3-lane section. And then at the intersection of 101st, we'll be providing a westbound left turn lane. We'll be extending the eastbound right turn lane about 300 feet. We'll have dual northbound left turns and 2 lanes receiving on the west approach. And so that cost is the $2.664 million. 109th from the west town limits to just west of US 41 will be a 3-lane section. Blaine from 93rd to 101st, that'll be a 3-lane section. We'll have to widen to dual northbound left turn lanes at 93rd, and then we'll have a right turn lane down at 101st, and there'll be a traffic signal at 101st. And so that also includes some widening of the bridge in there. So that's the $3.3 million. And then the last one is 101st between Klein and Blaine, and essentially you have turn lanes in there that need to be extended. And so that's a 3-lane section in there. So that's the total. Anybody have any questions?
Any comments? It's important that you, if you have any comments, you let us know, because what is our next step would be that we will use these once you make a decision about the fee, the amount of fee that will be, we will calculate the amount of fee that will be generated. And these options will be prioritized under the next chapter of our work. And so it is important that everybody agrees to this. We don't anticipate, at least I don't anticipate, that you will have all of this money available for the next 5 years, but there are grants and those things, and that was something we talked about yesterday with Craig, that some of these projects could be prioritized and could be put in some bucket that could be implemented next 5 years. But nonetheless, it is a list that we do want to make sure that you agree with it and you don't have any, we don't miss any comments from you.
Hey, Denny, this is Rick Eberly. Do these costs include right-of-way acquisitions, or is this strictly roadway improvement?
No, these costs are all costs. The right-of-way, construction, design, construction supervision, everything.
Okay,
But
thank you.
they are in 2020 numbers.
Right. Okay, thanks.
I mean, and Tagi, that's not for this group to worry about whether we could afford it, where the funding will come from. This is strictly an exercise of what deficiencies do we have and what does it require to fix them. Correct?
That is the list of deficiencies that we can address for the next 10 years based on that growth.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
These will be the only projects that are going to be acceptable to use the road impact money for. Is that true?
Denny, feel free to chime in. My opinion is that the final product and the ordinance will reference not only your comprehensive plan, but also your thoroughfare plan. And it is my understanding, and it is, I think, common practice, that as long as you you have projects identified in your thoroughfare plan, those projects will be eligible for impact fee expenditures. And it is, by that same token, it would be beneficial to you to update your thoroughfare plan to make sure that all of these are included in the thoroughfare plan. And then that is something that can be done after the completion of this study.
Right, Tagi, but Brian makes a good point that the fee would be predicated on the costs we see in front of us here. And although another project might become eligible for funding with the impact fee money, like, for example, the Klein Avenue extension that we're starting to talk about from 93rd to 101st, sounds like we could use some impact fee money for that, but we won't be determining the impact fee itself with any consideration towards the cost of that project. I think that's Brian's point. So even if it's eligible, is that right, Brian?
Exactly correct. That's it exactly, Rick. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, and it's important. It's important with regard to the Klein Avenue extension that Rick just spoke of. There are references, in this chart, as you can see, with regard to Blaine. And if we do the Klein Avenue extension, the money that's shown in terms of improvement costs for Blaine will become far less. Because you will have basically offset that need, by replacing with the Klein Ave extension. So I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but that's one way. That's one way to look at the Klein Avenue extension project, for example.
Right, that makes sense, Craig, as long as we do the Klein Avenue extension first, obviously.
Do we look at these costs, these growth-related costs? Do we look at these, Denny, as, yes, that's on the drawing board for future and eligible to use this money? However, the question becomes, what's the normal procedure or operation for picking and choosing projects? Is it the amount of money available, or is it the expediency of needing the possible improvement, some sooner than others?
I think what we're going to be looking at is a two-tier priority system. Projects that, based on traffic, to occur within the first 5 years, and projects that would probably not be needed in the first 5 years and could be done in the next 10 years, to kind of give you some budget level numbers of your needs versus how much your traffic impact fee will generate.
And this, of course, this estimate does not include any possibility of future expansion that may come in the next 2-3 years.
On the cost side, that's correct. On the income side, you would be able, if you, my understanding, Tagi, jump in here, but my understanding is if the town, say there's another area that is annexed in after this study is complete, and there's a subdivision that built in that annexed area, then those houses that get built, because they're within the town, the new town limit, are subject to the impact fee. And so you'll collect income, so to speak, from those units.
But we won't have the actual estimated cost of what some improvements may be necessary until we cross that bridge.
Yes, and again, you know,
Okay.
in each 5 increment, you're going to be reevaluating things.
Okay,
But
that's
more
fine.
more likely, the improvements that anything new coming into town will necessitate are probably pretty well covered in the list that we got you already. So I think for the 5 years, you'll have the cost accounted for. It's just a matter that they might be accelerated from the year 5 to 10 into the year 1 to 5.
Does the first group have the numbers already prioritized?
Already what, Brian?
Prioritized. In other words, have you already got, and since the study's been done and since you had your engineers working on the estimates, have you determined at that point which one of these projects should be first, second, third?
I won't have them by first, second, third. I'll have them by priority A, which would be in the next 5 years, and priority B in the last 5 years.
Okay.
I've been working on that, and we'll have that for you at the next meeting next week.
Okay. I just was curious as to how far you took it as what future costs and what would be, because the council will basically say to first group, what do you guys recommend we spend this money on? And that's before any grants or before any NERC money, if there's any NERC money or funds available for any of this, county money, federal money, anything.
That's correct.
Okay, great.
Any other comments? We can move on to the next section. We had the road part or the segment part. Now it is the intersections, the total intersection. All improvements is about 9.5 million. And out of that, about 6.7 million of it is existing deficiencies, and growth-related deficiencies is about 2.779. And Denny, you want to go, and I believe this includes that roundabout. Is that right, Denny?
Yes.
Okay, you want to go through that and.
Okay. The first one is 93rd. These are intersections now. First one is 93rd at White Oak. You have a 10 existing deficient, 455,000, and that's the cost of a traffic signal at that intersection. plus the addition of 100 foot onto the existing westbound at 93rd and 41. That project will include.
I'm sorry, can everybody else go on mute? Because Danny keeps cutting in and out, so it's kind of hard to hear.
I'm experiencing the same problem, Joan.
Thank you. Maybe if we all go on mute, it might help.
Okay, 93rd and US 41. That includes changing the eastbound left turn lane to a dual left turn lane and adding a right turn lane, and also providing a left turn at Kyleman. At 93rd and 9, that cost for improvement is for a roundabout, and then the growth-related cost is the cost to expand that roundabout from a single lane to a double lane. At 93rd and Blaine, we'll be adding a eastbound right turn lane in that cost, and then for the future, we're adding at 101st and Blaine for the $1,000. We're changing the intersection from a two-way stop to a four-way stop. And then the next one's 109th and White Oak. And the future cost there is for a traffic signal. And 109th and US 41, the existing cost is to add 300 foot to the existing westbound right turn lane. That's on the that should be eastbound right turn lane. And then convert that to a through and right lane. And then on the east approach, add 1,000 foot. So essentially what we're doing is we're adding converting a right turn lane into a through lane heading in the westbound direction. And then in the future, we're going to add back that right turn lane and then add a westbound through lane. And then the last one, 109th and 231 in Parrish, there's a roundabout that NDOT has for that intersection. They've that planned right now. And we will need to expand the north and south approaches on that roundabout. They have it right now as a single lane entry, and it'll need to be a dual lane entry in order to keep up the level of service, and that's what that cost is for. Any questions?
Danny, you want to talk about the roundabout options Dennis brought up last time on Klein?
Not only the options, but what is the cost savings if you were to put the dual lanes in at 93rd and Klein right from the jump?
We figured on that project, we figured that it actually would be built that way to begin with, so that you didn't tear out anything. And so the cost that you see for the 10-year is an incremental cost to build the full roundabout. So
you're still looking at 1.8 million, round numbers. Would that be building both lanes at one time?
Yes.
So in other words, the number could be higher. The 421 could be higher if you didn't put the second lane in the same time frame. Or are you saying this is but the option to put in the second lane, it's not going to save you any money putting it in to begin with?
That's right. We've already factored in the practicality of it is that you're not going to go back and redo a single lane and put it into a double lane. It would just, I don't know, maybe double or triple that $400,000 cost.
Okay.
So we factored in that for practical purposes, you'll build the dual lane. And
okay.
Just mark unnecessary lanes until you need it further into the future.
Any other comments? Yeah, if you're interested in the details of this, in our last presentation, then you had explanation of each item. You can refer to it.
Now, one thing I do want to mention, as you're figuring your traffic impact fee and how much revenue you're going to generate from the fee, is that this 6.785 million is a liability that you have for the next 10 years. And just from my preliminary look at it, a lot of that really is going to become needed sooner rather than later. And so just kind of keep in mind that when we talk about the overall cost for everything that is necessary, we've already got a liability of 6.785 million. And so as you figure what you want to use for your traffic impact fee, as you reduce, if you do, reduce that fee, that's going to then add to the 6.785 million for which the town will have to find funding for.
But Denny, I thought the road impact fee could only be assigned to projects that are growth related. So it can only go to cover the 2.8 million deficiency.
That's correct. So for instance, on this slide, if you would decide to use a 50% fee factor instead of the full fee, you would only collect 1.3 or 1.4 million, and the 1.3 that didn't collect would add to the 6.7. You follow?
Yes, okay, yes, yep.
Any other comments?
Yes, Dennis just texted me a question, a hypothetical. If on slide 6, which is all growth related improvements, he says, if the town starts one of these projects as a normal budgeted project, does this mean the road improvement funds will not be used, or will the project be funded by commingled funds? I'm guessing he's talking time constraints, that before we get this impact fee thing done, the town wants to start one of the projects on slide 6. But that's,
If this impact fee has not become effective, and that is 6 months after
right.
the council approves, there is no fund coming in.
Right.
So there will not be any commingling of any funds. After that time, any revenues that is generated, the town can use for growth-related improvements.
I think what Dennis might be thinking, and this is just speculation on my part, he can confirm it by text to Donna, but if we were to start 93rd, putting a third lane in, let's say from Route 41 going eastbound, and we're going to start putting a third lane into one section of 93rd, because we only have the money to do one section of the 3 pieces we originally dreamed about.
Okay.
Would the money going forward being put into that project, would it be allowed to be paid for out of the impact fee going forward if we had started the project already? I think that's what Donna or Denny's leading to, is can we pick up the ball after it becomes legal for us to use that money going forward? Can we, if a project is in process, can we still use the money, or does it become a current deficiency in which we can't cover the cost?
Yeah, and he said that's what he's getting at.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Do you understand me, Denny, Kagi?
I I think, I want to also ask Adam to chime in. Again, I'm going back to, let's assume that this process is complete by the end of the year. Your effective date of impact fee becomes July 1st of 2021. And if you make any expenditures prior to that time, I believe you cannot take credit for it as a growth-related expenditure.
I don't quite think that's where I'm thinking. Maybe Denny as well, and that is, say it was going to cost us $3 million to put a third lane down the middle of 93rd from 41 to Lake Hills. Therefore, if we only did half the project. We only spent $1.5 million because we didn't have any more money in our budget. That leaves $1.5 million of work yet to be done on that piece. Can we, once the impact fee is legal, July 1st next year, can we spend the $1.5 million remaining on these funds?
My first impression would be yes.
Okay, I figured.
Yeah, because it is growth-related activities, and my first impression would be yes.
So in other words, if we start the project, it doesn't necessarily change the category it's classified in until the project is complete. Is that a good assumption?
I think this is Denny Cobb. I think you're going to talk with Al about this because I think that once you sign a contract,
Guys, we're getting a lot of feedback. If you're not talking, please mute your mics.
I think that's a question you're going to want to talk with Adam Decker about as well, because I think once you've signed a contract, that's kind of the starting point. And it doesn't seem logical to me, but I'm an engineer and I'm an attorney, that if you sign a contract, say in May, and you don't start collecting impact fee until July, that you can't use July's receipts to pay for an expenditure that you have contracted in May. But again, I'm just looking at it logically, that supposedly when you sign a contract, the clerk treasurer has identified the funding to be used for that and has appropriated it. Now, so I don't know if you can then substitute funds later or not. So that's more of a clerk treasurer and an attorney question, I think.
So what you're basically saying, and I just want to clarify with Adams sitting in residence here, if you, let's say the contract should be for $3 million to do the project, and you know that the funds are going to be available out of this impact fee to pay half of it after they're available. Therefore, you sign the contract for only a part of it. So in other words, that will get around what you just stated as a possibility with Adam's input. Therefore, you wouldn't write a full contract for a $3 million deal. You'd only write a contract for half of it, so that when the funds were available, you could use the actual impact fee to pay the other $1.5 million, and you would sign that piece of the contract going forward after the impact fee was in place.
Well, but then you got other issues there, Brian, because like state board, you would have to do this by bidding a project out and then change order for $1.5 million, and then change ordering $1.5 million into that project. And I believe State Board of Accounts frowns on anything more than a 25% total change order addition to the project.
That was going to be my next question. Is what's the limitation that we can add to a contract?
20%, unless it's unforeseen situations.
So in other words, they've kind of beat you to the punch because they're way ahead of the game, knowing how everybody's going to play.
And they will sting you if you try to break a project into phases to get around the requirements for bidding.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If it turns out that you tried to break a project into phases in order to get around the requirement for bidding, oh, yeah, you're in trouble.
Okay.
The other thing I think needs to be asked, and and Adam, whoever from our consulting team, feel free to chime in on this, but I don't believe road impact fees are not exclusive. Like, you don't have to complete a road project with only road impact fees. You can use other funds to supplement that project. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Yeah. So it's not like you embark on a project and the only source of funds you can use for that are road impact fees. You can supplement that with other fees. I mean, case in point, for example, if we were to get federal funding for Klein Avenue extension, let's just say, and Denny and Tagi and I just talked about this yesterday. We could use part of the money. We could use road impact fees to pay our local match necessary to meet that federal grant. So these are not exclusive. Timing is an issue as far as when you start something, yes, but we can when we talked about the commingling of funds, as long as the road impact fee money is being used for a growth related deficiency project, you're okay.
Is it possible, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I want to verify it. Is it possible at any point to use this to put money up for, say, additional repaving next year?
No.
Okay.
Road impact fee money is not used for maintenance.
Oh, under any circumstance.
Tagi, Denny, Adam.
If it is maintenance, repaving, that's not eligible.
Okay. I just wanted to verify that. I thought I knew the answer. I wanted to make sure. Okay.
No, because it's not a growth-related deficiency.
Yeah, Brian, I think an easiest way to understand this, you can ask the question, is this going to increase the capacity of the road?
Okay.
If
Well,
it is
that's
not,
going to be a major question when I sit down with the rest of the guys on the council and discuss this at some point. That's going to be one of the questions they're going to jump to right away is there any money available for us to like, say, the match? If we get a 50-50 grant and we put $1 million in and have any kind of maintenance whatsoever, and I knew the answer, but I wanted to have you
for maintenance.
No maintenance. Right.
great conversation. Any other conversation around the intersections? None? Let's move on. You've seen this table. We talked about it last time, and basically it shows the total applicable impact fee for a 10-year period is $20,579,000. That's our total cost, and that is the expenditure you can make to address those costs. Does everybody understand this? Move on. Yes. Okay. So we have all the costs. Denny has done all of his modeling, transportation, traffic modeling, and he has come up with the total trips generated from all new developments. And that is 55,669. This is a little bit, I want to just make sure everybody understands this. This is a little bit different than what we presented last time, and that is basically because of the boo-boo that we had. So this is the total generated trips from
And that's
all
average.
development.
That's average daily trips, correct?
Yes.
Toggy, I guess I got one simple question, and that is comparative to the last study that was done 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever it was. Wasn't that number, Denny, like in the 15 or $5,000 to $6,000 range? And
This
this
is
is
the number
almost
of trips. This is the number of trips, not the fee. What
okay.
you're referring to is the fee that we calculated on that time.
Oh, okay. So the 5,500 I'm thinking of is the fee, not trips generated.
That was the base fee, yes.
What was the comparative number to the last study?
You got me on that. I don't know. Do you remember, Denny?
Yep, 167,000 trips.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to know. I was going to look it up, but I figured you might have it at your fingertips. So it's been cut in half. Basically, it's been a third. It's been cut down 66%.
That's correct. And Brian, if you remember at the last meeting, we talked a lot about how the reasons for why these trips have gone down. And Poggy had listed, I don't know, 4 or 5 reasons. It's 5 years has transpired. So some of the development that we had assumed in that last study has now occurred. There was also this time the committee went into a greater detail on the amount of commercial space that could be absorbed. We went back 10 years and looked at the commercial space and did the same thing with the residential. And we come up with an absorption rate on both sides, the residential and the commercial, that was quite a bit what we had the last time. So those two things, especially the commercial absorption rate, made a huge difference in the number of trips.
Totally understood.
Okay,
go ahead.
What Denny has done here, I want to just direct your attention that he has identified these types of different types of developments based on the zoning requirements and assigned or calculated the trips for each one of these categories. And you will see in the next slides that these categories have been used and these number of trips have been used to calculate the rate per single family home. And a good example, by 2030, all of the single family homes that we projected or you approved that will be is going to generate 10,921 trips. And so that's sort of the genesis of what we go on next slide, and that's where those trip numbers come from. Does everybody understand that?
Yes, and can you remind me the distinction between a C1 and a C2 for the commercial zoning?
There are two different types of zoning in the town, and I know Rick is there. Correct me if I'm wrong. And basically, C2 allows a higher density of development and larger developments than C1. Rick, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, that's, it's a little bit different than that, Taggy. See, what happens, Joan, is that in each of the commercial zoning districts, like C2 allows has a list of allowable uses in it, and it includes all of the uses in C1. And then C3 would include all of the uses that are allowed in C1 and C2. But the lot sizes are a little larger, just like in the R1, and actually it's the reverse of the residential zoning districts. C1 allows a smaller lot, C2 requires larger lots, and it goes up incrementally in that regard. But there are more uses allowed in C2 than in C1. C1 is the most exclusive commercial zoning district.
Thank you.
A recap again, just a couple of concepts. We are going to use it. I mentioned earlier when I was talking about what is on the agenda. There is an impact cost, that is the total growth related cost divided by total number of new trips. There is a sort of second concept that you will see, and that's called net impact cost. There is that relates to a state statute that requires certain credits to be given for certain activities that the taxpayers may have paid into it. Let me give you an example. A grant, the town may receive a grant. That grant, let's say it is federal grant. That grant is paid by the taxpayers, or a local expenditure has been made, a bond issue has been made. The existing residents do pay into that, and the state requires for such expenditures that a credit to be given in setting up or in reducing the total impact cost, as it is assumed that the existing residents and the future residents will pay through their taxes for these expenditures. So it should not be a double costing of the people. Am I making sense in this? Basically, this is grants, bonds, and those types of expenditures that are resident tax related. That is what we have that needs to be deducted. Does everybody understand that? We basically give them some credit back.
If I understand that right, you're saying that we're going to charge this impact cost, but we have to deduct other costs that we've already charged the taxpayers or will charge the taxpayers.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is absolutely correct. Yes. Okay. Again, there is not such a thing right now, but you will see it in our calculations that we do have some of these items identified, but at this point it is zero. So now we want to calculate the impact cost per trip. We do know what that applicable traffic impact cost is, $20,579,000. We have added an additional cost that is eligible, that is cost of performing the current study. So that adds to the total impact fee or growth impact cost. And there is no year-to-date impact fee receipts. This is basically, we add this for cash, also called cash in hand. These are receipts of the prior year's impact fee. And good example of it, currently the town has a parks impact fee, and there was a fee in there. There was inserted a fee as as an asset. Grant funding per trip, again, if the town had certain amount of grants, those grants will be applied as a credit. Road debt, a bond issue, the same situation, those would be applied as a credit. In other words, it will be a negative number. And so total adjusted trip impact cost, that is a total of all above charges. The 24-hour trip is $55,669. Then the cost per trip is $372.64.
And this number is comparable to the previous study of like 575 or whatever. It was in the ballpark, $500 to $600.
This is, yes.
Those are comparable. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you can, what you mean by comparable. This is the same number that we discussed last time, yes.
Okay.
So Taggy, if the town gets federal grants, for instance, in the future, because I know they're going to try and get those, does that mean the impact fee has to be adjusted at that point?
No, this would be for the next round.
All right.
So in other words, we're home free for 5 years against grant money for the anticipated expenditures or impact costs?
Yes.
Okay.
Does everybody understand this?
Yes.
I'll take it. Everybody understands that. That's great. So let's get back to this formula again. I'm almost sure everybody knows this by now, as many times as I repeat myself. But we said the impact fee is the number of EDUs times by net cost of growth per EDU. That's the sort of the difficult version of what I'm going to talk about. A simplified version of this is what you see on the screen says alternate version, and that's basically the trip cost, which is $372 times by number of trips generated by any use. And all of those numbers that you saw in Denny's table for residential and everything else, those are what we're talking about. Now, in terms of the EDU version, EDU we have talked about is a single family unit or a 1,000 square feet of commercial. That's one unit. And net cost per EDU, that is cost per EDU. That is cost divided by number of EDUs. And I have here minus the credit per EDU. Since we don't have any credit, forget it, but it is, at this point, we are talking about the cost, the total cost per number of EDUs. And cost EDU is the growth cost divided by number of EDUs. And the growth cost is the total cost minus deficiency cost that we have. So I want to make sure everybody understands this. Now, the alternate version is, you already know, and the number of trips generated by each use. We have an aggregate version of it, and we will assign it to individual types of uses as we go along. Does everybody understand this formula? Are we clear on it? Any questions on it?
What's the purpose of it? Why are we doing two versions?
Good questions, and I will get to it in the sample tree. And what it is EDU is the same as, is a different version of the number of trips. And I think, let me get to the samples and then I think that would be much clearer.
That's fine.
Yeah. And all the work that Denny has done, he has established that 10.41 is the number of trips that are generated by all future residential development. That is his modeling, that's his calculations. What the EDU represent is we are establishing that 10.41 as one EDU. Basically, it's a factor. So 10.41 equals 1. Every other use is compared with this EDU factor. Under this particular slide that you see, an R3, then he has calculated for R3, the number of trips is less than 10.41, so it is actually 10.34, and that represents 0.099 EDU factor. What we are doing here is basically dividing 10.34 by 10.41.
So is that 10.41 number from empirical data? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
Does everybody understand this?
And so for the R3, if it's a multifamily, that's for just the whole structure, not necessarily per unit?
Per unit.
So if it's a duplex, it's 2.
On this particular example, you need to define what duplex is. For a townhouse, it is much less. On this R2, for the town, R2 is basically single family home with a smaller lot. So it stays the same.
Okay, how about for the R3?
R3 is an apartment building type, and that is less.
But is it, so if there are 2 units in that apartment building, is this for both units combined?
Each unit will be multiplied by 1, yes.
So it's 10.34 per unit in a duplex, for example, Tagi, or if it happens to be a 4-unit building, then it's 10.34 per each of those 4 units. That's what Joan is asking, I believe.
Yeah.
That's the average daily traffic.
Per unit. Whether it's a 2-unit, 3-unit, 4-unit is irrelevant, it's 10.34 per unit.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Does everybody understand? This is the very simplified version. So what we have here is we are saying that one single family home represents 10.41 trips on a daily basis. and we have already calculated that a trip cost is $372.64. You multiply those two numbers, you get $3,879 per single family home. And that single family home also represents one EDU. Does everybody understand this fully?
Yes.
Great. Now,
Yes.
we're going to make this a little bit more complicated. We can certainly, the town can, go through a process of identifying, God knows, several hundred types of uses or to establish what that traffic generation of those uses are, or there is a handy table that Institute for Transportation Engineers, ITE, puts out periodically, which identifies the average number of trips for these different uses. And it's probably, I can't remember, 300-400 types of uses. They have 900, they have different categories. This one, for example, you see the highlighted that I have put in there, highlighted them, is one is for general industrial park, which is 0.63. I hope you can see it. But the other one is for another use that was for residential. But okay, we have a larger version of it here. I forgot. What this table does is makes life for Rick that is going to run this or his successor much easier because it is providing a multiplier or a factor for a variety of types of uses. And in this highlighted one, for example, is for 1,000 square feet of industrial, that represents 0.63. That means what? That means if we have for one single family home 10.41 trips, the 6.3 would be the number of trips that will be generated for a light industrial, or generally you can say a light industrial development generates about 6 trips per 1,000 square foot per day. Does everybody understand this?
I don't, because that's conflicting with the units that are being used on this chart. This chart is saying that on the general light industrial, it's 0.63 trips per unit. But you're saying
that is one EDU.
I'm sorry?
That is one EDU. One commercial EDU is 1,000 square feet.
Right. But what you just said doesn't, I mean, you said that it actually, that 1,000 square feet of industrial property generates 10 times 0.63. But if you look at the units in that chart, that 0.63 is trips per unit, not 10 times trips per unit.
I either misspoke or I wasn't clear. What I said was your EDU by empirical work represents 10.41, trips per day,
Right,
and that is equal to 1.
one
That
EDU.
that one represents either a single family home or a 1,000 square feet of commercial space.
Gotcha.
And when we get to here, this is 1,000 commercial space for industrial uses. These are national averages for industrial uses. What the institute is saying is that represents 0.063 EDU.
Yeah, I think it's the chart is mislabeled or it's misleading because the second column is labeled trips per unit, not EDU factor.
Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, we call it EDU factor, they call it that, but still it is the number of trips that is generated for that type of use. It's just a factor.
So Tagi,
Assuming, yeah,
Tagi, it's Rick. I want to see if I understand this. I think I do. So if I received a building permit for a general light industrial use and it was 1,000 square feet of space, I would initially charge them 1 EDU, $3,879. They could contest this and say, but my average is 0.63 trips per unit, so the fee should be 0.63 times 3,879 to give them their actual road impact fee. Is that correct?
no. You wouldn't charge them 1, you would charge them 1 times it by 0.63.
That's what I'm saying. I would charge. I would initially say if they gave me a building permit application and they said they had 1,000 square feet of general light industrial space, my first response would be, okay, that's 1 EDU or the $3,879. But because they have a factor of 0.63, I would multiply that 1 EDU, the 3,879, by 0.63 to get their actual road impact fee. So
You're absolutely right. That
Right.
is the methodology.
But
okay.
I think the problem is, as Jack said, that column where the 0.63 is should not be labeled trips per unit.
But that's in the ITE code. We don't have any control over how they,
Yeah, this is
Label that.
a study institute national that they do it. It's what they call it is irrelevant. The EDU is
right, so I'm gonna use that, I'm gonna use that factor and multiply it by the EDU for each of those uses. So you take the number 170, utilities, it's 2.27. So and if it's 1,000 square feet, I'm gonna multiply the EDU, the EDU times 2.27 to get their actual road impact fee. I agree with what Don is saying, and Jack's saying it's confusing because of the way it's labeled, but we don't have any control over that. So I'm just gonna use that factor times whatever the fee is that we determine it to be, that you determine it to be.
So why a single family now 0.99 where it's 1.0 on all of our charts?
As R3, Jack, yes.
We were talking, this is the latest edition of ITE, and for whatever reason, they are labeling that as 0.99 for single-family residential, and for us, for the town, what we are basically ignoring that because we do have empirical record empirical information. Denny has done the actual count, which is much higher than that, and that is 10.41. We are using that as our base.
So this chart is international. Our 10.41 number, is that a regional number? Is that a local or a national number?
That's a local number.
That's from Denny's model, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Based on Midwestern empirical data?
No, the town.
yes,
And
yeah, it's based on huge
is
number.
that local?
Sorry?
It's so local, you can say this is, your data, Denny, is St. John data?
No, the calculation process utilizes the national database of studies done all over the country. And so, for instance, if a local developer wanted to go out and say, okay, I'm building a subdivision and it's very similar to Summerlin subdivision that's just been approved, and he goes out and does a formal traffic study to determine what the actual trip rate from that subdivision is. It might be somewhat different, and he could then use that data and come to the advisory board or whatever the name of that is to petition for a different rate. I don't think that'll happen as much as we've had to make assumptions on what some of these parcels will be developed as. And so they might be developed differently. And so there'll be a process that will develop at the end of all of this that will say, okay, if we sell this as a shopping center and what went in on this site was a Lowe's department store, or Lowe's Hardware, for instance, and that has a different rate than what we had assumed, the developer would be able to use the ITE code to come up with how many trips per day his development occurs, and if it's less than what we've identified that and in our process for determining the cost, then he's allowed to use those numbers and be assessed accordingly.
So can I just ask a clarifying question then? So for an R1, we said it's 10.41 trips, average trips per day, and that is 1 EDU. So 10.41 average trips equals 1 EDU. So if on the general light industrial, if we had a 1,000 square foot building, how many average trips per day would be assigned to that building?
If we use the ITE number factor,
Yes.
that is 6.3, that basically represents about 7 trips, or 6 point some number of trips. You're multiplying that 0.63 by 10.41.
10.41, okay, that's what I want to make sure the math is. So it's
Yeah.
63% of the 10.41 equals the number of trips for average trips for a light industrial.
That's correct.
Okay. So the conversion factor is 10.41 average trips per day for 1 EDU.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to move on. This is the same exact same sort of, we've put this one now in a sort of example. I have a single family home, and that is the fee for a single family home would be 10.41 times it by 372, which ends up with $3,879. Now, if there was 10 houses, that number multiplied by 10 houses. Any questions on this? I think we have. On this example, everybody's clear on it?
I've got a question for Jenny, and that is the average trip per day is the empirical number, the 10.41 is something that you've calculated from studies, from actual traffic studies, but only for residential use. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, what we did was calculated the number of trips for each development by the ITE trip generation information. Okay, we summed all of those trips. We then divided all of those trips by the total number of residential units, and that comes up then with the trips per unit per day.
Your 10.41 number.
Yes.
Okay, but from what I'm seeing here is that was not done for like a commercial use, and therefore that's why we're doing this conversion.
We have that information. What Tandy is showing you is essentially a process by which we will be able to apply to all of the land uses. He's kind of using an example here to show you how it would go for any land use. And I wouldn't be so fixed on that previous table as what he's showing you coming up here as far as the dollars and what that's going to represent on a fee for a typical type of use.
All right. Thank you.
Donna, are you convinced? You fully understand it?
Oh no, but I'm getting there. I mean,
Okay,
you know, I got the concept. I'm just trying to let it
Right,
in.
right. I always apologize. I said, I know I hate to put you through this stuff. We deal with these on all the time, and so it is difficult to for somebody to, for the first time you seeing it.
Well, you got to remember that 10.41 is a residential number, and
Right.
and now we're trying to apply it across the spectrum of land uses, and so there's a gap there, but that's okay. It's filling in.
Mhm.
To
Okay.
get to the crux of the matter, and that is simply when you calculate the unit, when you're doing a building permit, somebody comes in and they're building $1 million house. And in a brand new development like the Continental, and somebody comes in and wants a building permit for $1 million house, and how do you get the calculation as to trips per day for that development?
If it is one single family home, regardless of the price, you've already calculated what that EDU is.
That's the 1041, correct?
Multiplied by 372, yes.
So therefore, if you're going to set a fee based on an average for everything, correct?
The fee is based on the average traffic, yes.
Okay, so therefore, for the first 5 years, when you put a fee in place, that fee is going to stand for whatever period of time. 5 years is going to say you start off at $1 and you want to raise it 10% every year to the 5th year. So that's $1.05, and then whatever it works out to from $1.05 times 5% times 5% times, or 105 basically. Therefore, by the time you get to the end of the 5-year period, then that's when the committee, the actual review committee, will sit down and reevaluate the first 5 years. Is that correct?
You're going a little bit ahead of me. A couple of slides down the line.
Oh, okay. No, I don't want to screw up your presentation. I guess thinking ahead. Okay.
I hope you don't mind. I have everybody,
No.
I think, focus on these EDUs. I want to make sure that everybody understand before we throw at them something else.
No, not a problem. I'm just, well, you already know what I'm thinking then. Go ahead.
Right. So we went through the one single family calculations. Now we have 50 units. This is actually a development in a 50 units apartment building. And so the number of units are 50. The EDU factor is, in the case of apartments, is 0.56. And so that would give us the total number of EDUs, and then we multiply that by the cost per EDU, which is $38.79. So in effect, we have determined, when you see on the row it says determine the number of EDUs, that is, we're talking about those trips. And if you multiply 50 by the EDU factor, we get 28. We said the trip rates, according to ITE factor, is 0.56. And so the fee becomes the total number of EDU, that's 28, times it by 38.79. That's our total fee for 50 units of apartment. If we multiply that total fee that we have calculated, this is more for reg. If we divide that total fee by the number of apartment units, which is 50, it gives us the fee per apartment unit. So if a development consistent of 50 units comes in, let's say, 5 different buildings, and they want to build one building at a time, and then, Rick, you would need to charge them $21.72 times by 10 per building.
So when you're saying 50 units, you're saying 50 buildings with however many apartments are in there.
No, 50 units. 50 units and however many buildings it could be, or they could be.
Okay, so this is by individual apartment.
Right.
In other words, a 50-unit building would cost an average of $2,172.33 per unit in each building.
That is correct.
So therefore, a building permit for one unit with 50 units in one building translates to they would have to come up with an impact fee alone without the building permit considered. They would have to come up with $109,000 ballpark for that 50-unit building.
You're absolutely right. You got it, Brian. Does everybody get it? In effect, what we are saying is a 50-unit apartment in comparison with a single family units represents 28 single-family units in terms of generating traffic.
So the average trips per day that we assume for a single apartment is half of what we assume for a single family home.
A little bit of slightly over, yes.
Yeah, 5.8, yeah.
0.56.
Yeah.
Let me just throw this out just for a general feel. Denny, you can join in if you're welcome. Is $109,000 a number? And since you've seen the studies and such, and we don't have any 50-unit apartment buildings, is this a prohibitive number for a 50-unit apartment building somewhere else with the same statistics we have? In other words, if you're building it, is this a prohibitive number?
Well, Brian, this is Rick. I don't think that's something that Denny can answer. That's just something that a prospective developer of a complex like that has to take into consideration.
Oh, no. I just thought for general conversation, if, we have, and the committee itself, including myself, have no clue about some of these, just using this calculation, if some of these numbers would be prohibitive for, let's say, Chicago. If this was the exact same scenario except Chicago, 50-unit apartments might be commonplace, whereas here, it's unheard of.
Right, but I think the bottom line is the fee, the one ERU fee of $3,879, do people think that that's a prohibitive fee? Now, on a single-family home, we realize that, that's a pass-through cost to the ultimate buyer, that whoever pays for the permit's gonna pay that price, but they're,
Correct.
I would think, going to tack it on to the cost of selling that lot or that house. Jack can address that better than we can, but that's where it with a 50-unit apartment building. I don't know how that shakes out for a potential developer, but you can compare it to an industrial or a commercial project as well. Typically, the developer's going to pay for that fee up front, or whether it's a Wendy's or McDonald's or whatever, the end user is going to pay for that fee. And do we think that fee is too high at $38.79?
That's
Let me
my
give you an
point,
example.
Rick.
It's all dependent upon the value of the property, right? If you're talking about a developer building 50-unit apartments that are studio apartments that are going to rent for, $500 a month, versus if you're talking about an apartment that are bigger in scale and are going to rent more per month, the financials for that developer is completely different, right?
Exactly, Joan.
So I don't know that we could say, is this prohibitive? Well, the same thing on a single-family house. If a single-family house is a $100,000 house and you're going to charge them, $3,800, versus if it's $1 million house and you're going to charge them $3,800, it doesn't matter the value of the property. It's the type of property.
Right.
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 So, is it prohibitive? I don't know that we could say if it's prohibitive or not.
Well, that's the point that's going to be raised by people who don't understand what we do about this process. And they're going to look at this number, the $38.79, and go, we couldn't possibly charge that. And, basically we're all in agreement that number becomes prohibitive. Whereas this calculation shows that a one unit for $2,200 may not be prohibitive in Chicago if you're renting out the units for, $5,000 a month.
Another way to look at this.
Go ahead, Denny.
Another way of looking at this is, say it cost you $100 per square foot to build this apartment building, and say you got a 1,200 square foot apartment. That's going to be $120,000. So this cost is about, less than 2% of that. And as somebody else pointed out, if they're only building 600 square foot apartments, then the per percent share is going to be higher than 2%. Or the converse is, if you're building a more luxury apartment at $200 a square foot, then your cost is going to be only about less than 1%.
Right, so you cut in half, yeah.
So it's going to be difficult to assess, I think, in the residential area, whether or not this is cost prohibitive, because it kind of depends on the entry or on the level of cost that the developer is shooting for his market. Somebody that wants to try to provide $100,000 homes will perhaps argue that this 3,800 is, it's now you're approaching 4% of the value of the home. But on the other hand, you get some of these homes that are $500,000. I don't think a $3,800 fee is going to make that much difference. When the kitchens are $30,000 to $50,000 in these things, so it's kind of relative. I think probably the bigger impact is going to be when we start talking shopping centers and commercial type development, because of the pass through for the leasing space. And I think that was what Mr. Boyer was saying when we did this last time around, is that the full fee was equivalent to what he could charge per month for leasing, and he felt that really put him at a cost disadvantage.
That was basically why I asked the question, is because that's the kind of questions you're going to get from people on the planning commission or citizens on the street, because they're not going to understand what we do about how these numbers were created and how they're generated and what the end result is. People are going to look at that number and it's going to shock them. And that's the thing.
We have 20 minutes. I got several slides. All of these things we can discuss it, what that rate should be. These are the things you will discuss next week. And if you don't mind, I want to get through this and hopefully get some time for conversations with Adam about the structure of the fee, so we can move to next sort of phase of the work, if everybody agrees with that.
You can go ahead.
Yeah, this is the third example, and this one is a 10,000 square foot shopping center. Again, shopping center has a trip rate, or that multiplier rate, of 3.81. And so we have a 10,000 square feet. That's equals to 10 EDU, 1,000 square feet per EDU. And if we multiply that by 3.81, that is 38.1 total trip generations, or the number of EDUs. And we multiply EDU by 3879, the cost of one EDU, that gives us to $147,900 $795 for this development. This is a 10,000 square feet shopping center, has this multiplier, and we know what that EDU is, and that's the cost for a 10,000 square foot building permit.
Let me ask this, Tagi, if you don't mind. Rick, just ballpark, what would you say would be the normal building permit fee for a 10,000 square foot shopping center?
Wow.
I know that. I know. I'm asking for like a crazy back of the napkin idea here, but I'm just wondering how $147,000 fee.
Yeah, that's going to be huge, but ours is based on the cost of, the estimated cost of construction, so, it's $7.50 per $1,000 of construction cost, and 10,000 square foot shopping center, I'm not sure how much that would cost to build. And then, of course, you've got all the ancillary, the plumbing and the electric and all that. But I would think, good gosh, I would think it's got to be, I wouldn't think it'd be anywhere near the 147,000. I think the 147,000 would dwarf the actual building permit fee for something like that.
Yeah. I'm just asking that's a big number.
That's a big number, right?
Yeah.
How big is Shops on 96? How many square feet is that?
100,000.
Well, that's what was proposed. Now, what it ends up being ultimately, don't fully know yet. But
well, he's got two buildings in there, I think, that are estimated to be 15,000 each.
How many square feet is Kmart?
I think that's about 60,000, Joan. I believe, if memory serves, I think it's about 60,000 square feet.
Okay.
Wow.
This is where we got hung up last time we did this. These were big numbers, and even at that time, I think Culver's was looking around for a spot 3 or 4 years ago and was freaking out over the potential of what the road impact fee would add to their permit, and I think the word prohibitive was used earlier, and that would have pushed them to go to another town.
And another question that I'd like to ask is, we've done a lot of other comparisons with Doublesville, Fishers, other communities like that.
We'll get there.
I'm sorry?
Get there next week. Yeah.
We'll get that next week?
Yes, we'll get there next week. I just want to make sure.
I figured. I'm just saying it would be good to know what their commercial and industrial rates look like.
Right. Yeah, 2 things that I want to make sure that everybody understand is that the trip rates, as well as we already know about the cost per trip. And all of these factors, they are factors at this point. What I want to also bring to your attention is, you recall I started a simplified version in terms of the examples. I thought that I bring that simplified version into this example. If we use the EDU process, that is what you have. If we use a simplified version, which is actually going to happen in most cases, particularly if they're larger developments, when they do the actual trip generation studies, traffic study, they're going to come up with their own trip. So this process, the simplified version, will be used more often than for these larger developments or commercial developments than what you see the EDU version. If we were to go with that other alternate method, we have a 10,000 square feet. We do know that for a shopping center, again, this is a specific ITE 820 code, that type of development generates 39.66 trips. As I said before, a single family generates 10.41, a shopping center generates 39.66 trips per 1,000 square feet. So if we have a 10,000 square foot commercial building, that generates, using the trip generation, that generates 396 number of trips. Okay, you multiply that by the cost per trip, 372, you get exactly the same number as using the methodology using the EDU. This method is often used, and this method is also favored by the engineers because it is more realistic and locally based. And the result is the same, but it could go down based on the actual situation that exists or that concerns that a particular development. Danny, did you want to add anything to it?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Does everybody
Well, I mean,
understand?
by virtue of the math, they should come out to be the same, correct?
Right.
But the only variable that somebody could argue against is, are the average number of trips for their development, is that in fact what they would expect, right? Like in the example that we had, that we reviewed at the very end of the last meeting, there was a dentist that he came in, lobbied and said, hey, I don't have as many trips per day as what you are calculating my fee off of, and I'm going to petition to have a reduction because of that, right?
Absolutely. I'm glad you read it and you understood it. Yes. And that
Yeah.
is what a lot of commercial development, it is worth it for them to spend the 6 to 10 grand doing a traffic study and reduce their fee.
Right. So I mean, I think the math is the math, right? And
Right.
then I don't know, I think the discussion then is that if we think this is prohibitive, maybe Adam needs to weigh in to give us some direction as far as, well, what are the options as a town do you have to alleviate some of that prohibitive nature of this fee, whether it is, I forget what it was called in the document, but, trade-offs, or encouraging the developer to do a traffic study to say that my trips per day is going to be less, or are there trade-offs, I forget what it was called, like in lieu of, or credits that you could give them against that. So I think that's kind of the math is the math. And now what are the options that we have to potentially not make it so prohibitive? And I don't know if that's where Adam weighs in or.
Well, you have a role in that. Certainly Adam can also add, but we're going to get to it. Next slide is talking about those. but I want to make sure that, does everybody understand these three examples so we can move forward? Any questions on this last example? Great. This is what we have talked about. I think Brian brought it up. And in all of these things, we are looking at magnitude of these costs. But you do have some options. Different communities figure that one out. And that's basically you recall, I may have mentioned this is your second biggest decision you will make in this whole process. You have, in terms of setting the fee, there are a couple of options that you have. One option is called flat rate. That means that you can set the fee that we have calculated, $38.79, as your base, and for all types of development. Or a second version of the flat rate would be that you select a percentage of that as your base. And for example, a 50% rate would be half of what you see on the screen. And if we were to use this flat rate, all of the fee per EDU per 1,000 square foot will be established at $38.79. A good example, you can see on the other side, the EDU factor or the trip rate for a single family will be 1, and everything else will go based on that. And a sort of, in terms of magnitude of these costs, you can see that for a shopping center, you're looking at, for 1,000 square feet, $14,000. If that shopping center is Kohl or Target, for example, individual shopping building, that generates a little bit higher traffic, and that would be 18,000. The industrial that we talked about is going to cost $2,400 per 1,000 square feet if you set it as a base at 100% rate. So that's one option. Does everybody understand this?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to move a sort of fraction. Just, this is an example. I've used 50% arbitrary. That's my number. You will set that number. If we go for 50, you can compare how it's basically the math, how the fee is cut by half per 1,000 units, per 1,000 square feet, or per unit of housing. So this is the second methodology, and or the second option in terms of flat rate. There is a second option is called graduated rate, and that is, I think Brian also mentioned it, that is that you set a graduated rate. Typically that graduated rate increases, and you go, that is your decision. In this particular example, I've started with 25% and went up to 50%. A lot of cases I have seen that they start at 50%, and by the year 5, they go to 100%. But again, that is your cost.
Tommy, this is a little confusing.
Huh?
This is a little confusing because we don't start collecting the fee until 2021.
That is correct. That's my mistake.
Okay, so we would just shift everything a year.
Yes.
Okay.
Basically, on year one, you set it up, that fee at whatever rate you like, and typically it goes up higher. Okay? Um, this is basically the end of my presentation in terms of these fee options. I could certainly answer any questions, but I think we can discuss it next week again. And you think about it. I know a lot to think about, but I have 2 minutes to give to Adam. I'm hoping that Donna, you wouldn't mind to go over a little bit more than 2 hours and discuss the waiver issues and the other issues that Adam had done analysis.
I think as long as it's not number oriented, where our brains can rest a little bit and get into something a little more esoteric, we might be able to handle a little more time.
That's Adam's answer, but I think before we get to there, Dennis had sent this question in this, for the sake of time. I think the answer Denny would give you is no and no. So we're going to move on to Adam. So do you have any questions for Adam?
So I think last time we talked about that a individual or person that is being assessed, or entity that is being assessed the road impact fee, that they can do an appeal, but the state statute doesn't really provide for a waiver process, right? I think that's what we talked about last time. So are there any other options that a entity can pursue besides the appeal process to decrease the amount of fee that they may incur from this road impact fee?
So we discussed briefly, and I sent material about the appeal process. In addition, there is, the statute allows for a credit in lieu of payment of the impact fee, and that basically would allow the owner or developer to propose certain improvements or perhaps dedicate roadway as part of the development that the town would then have jurisdiction over. But it doesn't have to be limited necessarily to road and bridge improvements. It can be other improvements, and that those improvements can be made in lieu of an impact fee. Now, the ordinance does generally require that there be engineering estimates of the costs of the improvements and engineering costs, and so there is some requirement to justify what those expenses are. But that's an alternative method apart from an appeal to the impact fee review board. The statute also allows, if the fee is in excess of $5,000, to allow that to be paid in installments. The statute basically requires that the entire fee be paid within 2 years of the date of the issuance of the building permit. So it doesn't give a lot of time to an owner or developer to pay that, but it does allow them to perhaps to stretch that out over some period of time. Another possible method that is not contained in the statute whatsoever. So When I refer to the statute, I'm referring to Indiana Code 36-7 for 1300, the 1300 series. And there's nothing in the 1300 series that specifically allows for a waiver of the fee. Now, I've done some research with members of the town council and looked at what some of the other towns have done, and specifically the city of Fishers. It used to be a town, it's now the city of Fishers. And Fishers, which has adopted an impact fee for traffic for road and bridges, has entered into economic development agreements with an owner or developer, really as a means to as an incentive for the development. The town or the city has agreed to waive certain fees, whether they're the road and bridge impact fee or other similar fees. And basically that's been approved at the council level in the form of an economic development agreement. And in looking at that and examining the legality of that, Indiana is a home rule state, which means basically home rule allows the towns and cities and other units to take action as they see fit, as best they see fit, as long as it complies and conforms with state statute. And if state statute sets forth methods and procedures and requirements, then of course the units have to follow those. So on the one hand, we have a statute that is completely silent as to the granting of waivers. And on the other hand, Indiana, being a home rule state, perhaps would give authority to a town council to enter into an economic development agreement with an owner or developer. And as part of the consideration of that agreement, the town or the city might consider a full or partial waiver of those fees. So that, I think, is all of the potential methods and avenues that might be available to an owner or developer to consider a reduction of the fee.
And Adam, is the credit in lieu of payment, is that a dollar for dollar? So if they were to spend, $100,000 or $100,000 on an improvement, that it's a credit of $100,000 against that fee?
Yes, basically that's correct.
Okay.
Can we, for purposes of discussion, agree, Adam, and this is with your approval, can we agree to quit using the word waiver? That seems to be a stumbling block for people who approach this issue, and I understand your legal stance, and what you've written and I've read is waiver is not a good word. So maybe we ought to just keep that out of our discussion, when in reality, a economic development council issue is really a credit of sorts, and let's use credit instead of the word waiver. Is that agreeable to you?
Yes, it is. I mean, like I said, the statute, nowhere in the statute will you find any provision for a waiver or a mechanism for a waiver of these fees. There's certain provisions that allow for deductions in very limited circumstances. And when I say that, I'm referring to a code section that basically it gets into basically families earning less than 80% of the median income for the county. So low income housing development that might be a type of development that might be eligible for certain reductions. But apart from low income housing in the statute, there is no provision for waivers. So I think it would be good to consider not really discussing it in terms of waivers, but in terms of perhaps, credit in lieu of, where there's a dollar for dollar, or the appeals process where one can essentially present objective evidence as to why the fee that sought to be imposed and collected by the town is not accurate, and perhaps doesn't take into consideration certain facts and factors that are inherent to that specific development that's being proposed.
That's why I'm making the suggestion I am for this committee to discuss it as a credit and not a waiver, and therefore it'll cause less confusion for people who don't understand the issue.
Brian, the only concern with that is the language, the difference in language between waivers and credits. There's no guarantee you're going to get a credit.
No,
credit is specifically tied to a very specific reduction allowed based on a study provided or, the additional information that the statute allows. It's tied to that. It's not, the credit can't be set just by saying we want to give a certain amount of credit. And there's no guarantee that they're going to get a credit, because if their study comes back and says that they generate the number of trips, the ITE suggests, or even more potentially, then they're not going to get the credit. Am I understanding that correctly, Tagi and Adam?
I think in terms of whether we call it credit, I would call it incentives. That is an economic development incentive. That is, yes, it is within the authority of the town to provide incentives for certain types of economic development activities, and you can define that. And whether you can include and that is waiver of all the fees or incentive for the fee reduction, whether that is within the statute for the impact fee specifically, that is, I think, that's Adam's question, and I think he said it is doable. Correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, and that's in terms of economic development incentive.
That's a better word, Tagi, is incentive instead of waiver. I'm trying to get away from the word waiver, because when I mentioned it in my discussions with Adam, his reaction was the statute does not allow for waivers. And therefore, in order to eliminate that happening again in public, discussing it with people, they can understand incentive, which throws it over to the Economic Development Commission versus a waiver that could be given. The town council cannot touch the actual calculation of the building permit fee, whereas we can issue credits for an EDU or an EDC contract.
Yeah, economic development incentives could include other fees that the town imposes.
Correct.
And we know that a lot of communities are doing it. To me,
they're not using the word waiver either that I saw.
That's correct.
So therefore, we ought to just walk away from that word and use incentive or credit in lieu of the word waiver, just to eliminate any confusion.
Yeah, in this thing, the question for me is whether we can include the impact fee as a part of those incentives that the town can offer.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I can align to that, Brian. I mean, the appeal process is where a person is fundamentally disputing an assumption that we've made in our calculation of what the impact fee should be. So they have their situation is different than what was assumed in the calculation of the fee. So they're requesting an adjustment in one of the parameters or one of the attributes that goes into the calculating of the fee. The credit in lieu of payment, I mean, it's a dollar for dollar I'm going to provide something for the town, and the town's going to provide me credit against my road impact fee. And the third thing then is hey, within the context of a complete and more comprehensive economic development incentive package, one of the items that we're going to discuss is the road impact fee that could be open for.
I agree with you totally. The fact that the town, the council, and let's make the differentiation that Adam made, which is totally sensible. The town council can vote on an EDC contract, whereas the appeal committee is the last stop on the impact fee. The town council has no authority whatsoever to change the impact fee by the developer complaining. The town council has no power whatsoever, whereas as an economic development contract, we have the final say-so.
Right. So Adam, in the case where it's a credit in lieu of payment, who is the one who has the final say in determining, yes, these items are eligible for that credit that will offset the road impact fee?
So, in the case of in the case, well, let me refer to the statute. The statute, it doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, that would be, in all likelihood, the town council. It basically provides that a fee payer is entitled to a credit against an impact fee if the owner or developer of the development constructs or provides infrastructure that is an infrastructure type for which the unit imposed the fee, i.e. roads and bridges, or an improvement, and that goes beyond roads and bridges. A fee payer is entitled to a credit under this section for development that was constructed after 1999 and meets these sections. The amount of the credit allowed under this section shall be determined at the date the impact fee is assessed. However, if an assessment is not requested, the amount of the credit shall be determined at the time the structural building permit is issued. It then goes into how that's determined, the cost of constructing or providing the infrastructure, the fair market value of land, real interest, and site improvements provided. So it doesn't specifically indicate who approves that, but in my opinion, that would ultimately rest with the town council.
Thank you.
All I started the original conversation was to eliminate the word waiver in our conversations. Therefore, causing less credit is fine. Economic development agreement is fine, but waiver seems to throw people. So if you just stay away from the word, it should settle things down as far as confusion goes. Agree?
No, I do agree, and I want to add to my point. If there's a dispute, meaning there cannot be an agreement reached for a credit in lieu, then ultimately, under Section 1336, the owner or developer may file a petition for determination of the amount of that credit with the Impact Fee Review Board. So again, the Impact Fee Review Board consists of 3 persons that would hear a technical appeal, if you will, which was discussed earlier, but then also would consider the issue of this credit in lieu of if there's an inability to agree as to what the amount of that credit should be.
Right, and the actual appeal board, the review board, has the final say-so in that case, not the town council.
Yes.
That's what I wanted cleared up, is the fact that the council has no leverage or no power over the appeal board's decision, regardless of what the subject matter is. It's the appeal board is the final court and makes the decision. The town council cannot overrule it. They can't vote differently. Whereas with an EDC agreement, the town council has final say-so.
Adam, this is Denny Cobb. Question on qualifying infrastructure for credits. If a developer puts in right turn lanes, left turn lanes, and traffic signals at his front door on public right-of-way, we were told when we went through this the first time that that was a cost of development and not considered a credit. Could that be considered a credit if this committee so desired to do that?
So the statute provides, and I alluded to this earlier, it simply says that a fee payer is entitled to a credit against an impact fee if the owner or developer of the development constructs or provides infrastructure that is an infrastructure type for which the unit imposed an impact fee. So you have to basically take that apart to analyze that a bit further. But it also says, or an improvement. And so that, I think, use of that word improvement, I think, is intended to generally describe perhaps what you've just alluded to, Denny, are these turn lanes or improvements that ultimately become part of the town's inventory of roadway, or the state's inventory of roadway if it's a state highway. I would have to look at that further to be definitive. The use of the term improvement just generally, I think, would contemplate those situations.
You can go ahead and do that, Adam, okay, to clarify the issue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Brian, those are big numbers. And
Right.
so while a shopping center may generate a high fee, part of the complaint previously was, look, I got to do right turn lanes and possibly put in a traffic signal. I may have $300,000 or $400,000 wrapped up in off-site improvements at my front door. And so if we were to allow that to be served as a credit against a traffic impact fee of 1.3 million or whatever the number would be, that would help, I think, to mitigate some of that cost. And the way we looked at it before, that wasn't eligible. So I think if Adam could give us a determination on it, that would be another way to help ease the burden on, especially on commercial development, and it's going to be big commercial development. You talk about a Culver's going in, they're not going to put in a right turn lane or a traffic signal. But a large development where they would be generating a high impact fee, this would be a way to help offset some of that.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I think that was, Danny, you're correct, and you may remember, I did have several conversations with the attorney there, and that, as a result of his analysis, it was, I think you're absolutely right. His opinion was, if somebody puts a curb cut to get to the parking lot, that's their cost. That's not an improvement. And but if there are these sort of egress and egress lanes that are put in there to ease traffic, then yes, that is that becomes an applicable or eligible cost that can be credited. Adam, is the question of the EDC providing those incentives, is that something you need to do additional research as to whether or not those incentives could include impact fees, or you're prepared to make a opinion right now?
Well, no, I'm not. I think it's important to clarify, what an economic development commission is, as distinguished from an economic redevelopment commission. Legally, they're two separate entities with their own sets of requirements. And so, in terms of, you said economic development or economic redevelopment, certainly I think I would need to further provide some analysis as to those bodies or what can or could not be done. My conversation earlier was just generally about the town council. And in the town of St. John, the town council serves both as, the council and the economic redevelopment committee, but that's a different entity. That's not necessarily the powers of an economic redevelopment committee are a bit different. So I would probably need to further explore that before we could make any, final determination, or I could give any final, opinion as to those matters.
Why don't you do that, Adam? Because
Okay.
we're gonna need the answers anyway.
Yeah, it is important whether or not through redevelopment commission or EDC, some incentives can be put in place, and that could address some of this cost. And I'm not sure, based on my experience, how the redevelopment commission is set up in St. John, but I would think that Economic Development Commission would have a larger opportunity for fee waivers or fee reduction due to economic development and due to nature of the area that we are targeting. But nonetheless, it is, I think, hopefully by next week, we will have some information that the committee can then make a decision for discussing perhaps the final fee.
I think that the discussion taking place next week, if we have answers that Adam will provide, and him looking at these two items, basically, I think that will clear up a lot of things, at least in my mind. And as far as the town is concerned, the town council, we understand how the process works now, but at the same time, we need the added leverage to be able to deal with these developers coming through the door, and so that we can ultimately decide how we're going to approach them and what kind of credits can be involved and or what kind of agreements legally need to be written so that we can work within the system, and under legal considerations, we can get the job done. I think that's the most important key, and Adam has the key to the lock. So
Yeah, these are legal questions, so.
Exactly, and that's why, him looking at these items that we brought up, I think is very important to our final determination as to how we go about this.
Yeah. Okay, anything else, from the committee? Well, I know we are, I'm sorry, Donna, we are really going over your limit. The second issue in terms of, having the subzone, we're gonna discuss that later until this issue of incentives is, or credit is resolved.
Were we able to get any answer on why, which town was it, used to have zones but does not anymore?
Noblesville.
Yeah, were we able to get any response on why they changed? Could we do that before the next meeting?
Has anybody made the call? Adam, Tagi?
I have not, but I know myself and, Craig, we talked about to talk to the planner there, both of us know him. And, that's something we probably need to do that, but certainly Adam can also talk to their, attorneys if they have, the sort of the background knowledge.
I think it'd be good to know the answer to that before we make a decision, because if they found out something we need to know, then we need to know it.
Totally agree, Donna.
Who wants to take that on?
What do you suggest, Adam? Would it be okay for Craig to do it, or do you feel more comfortable if you got in touch with them to better understand the situation?
Right, so, no, I think the last time we met, I believe Craig indicated that he knew the planner in Noblesville, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
And so I think that would be, I mean, I, as an attorney, I don't know the attorneys in Noblesville.
Okay.
I would be kind of a bit more on a fishing expedition to try to find that out. And so ultimately, I don't know that the attorneys would be able to tell me why the town council may have taken a certain action in the past. I think the planners in Noblesville perhaps would have better information. So I'm certainly can try to reach out, but I don't know anybody. I don't have any connections that I can, rely upon to start that conversation.
Craig, you're muted.
Sorry, guys, I had to step away for a call with the town manager of Cherville. I heard what Adam was saying, and I have reached out to Sarah Reed in Noblesville, and we're playing a little bit of phone tag with regard to information and background on their fee. So I just want to let you guys know I'm working on that, and I mentioned that to Tagi and Denny yesterday.
Okay, just keep it on the top of your priority list, Craig.
Yep, I'm working on it. So.
Okay. Yeah, we'll need that for next week's meeting, so thank you.
Okay, if there is no other questions, I want to make sure that we have, in our next week, it'll be, at this point, I believe we have advertised or notice for October 8th. And I assume all the committee members will be available for that day. We are going to talk about the fee options. Hopefully you have digested these, and I'm going to add another item agenda, and that is Adam talking about the incentives, and also Craig talking about the background on the other issue. And I don't know if you're going to be prepared.
So Tagi, let me ask you this question real quick. So for next week's meeting, when I talk to Sarah, based on our previous conversation, I was going to ask her about the consolidation of their districts into one, or their zones into one, and why. What else do you want me to ask her? Do you want me to ask her for some examples of what the fee is in their community based on different size development with regard to commercial?
I have that information. I have that information.
You have that? Okay. But that's all you really need to know.
Yeah.
Okay, you just really need to know the background of why they consolidated and okay.
Yeah, and
I'll try to get some information from them about the types of projects they've done with it as well.
That would be great.
One other thing to consider, Craig, that would be what was the reasoning behind doing the split in the first place, followed up by why did they combine it again after some period of time?
Do we happen to know when they established their fee?
Not off the top of my head, I can't tell you. Maybe Toggy can or Denny, but
yeah.
I believe we can. I believe we have the ordinance. We have the ordinance.
I was just wondering how long it's been in place because how long Sarah's been with the city. It's been a while, but I don't know if she's been there the whole time the fee's been in place, or if it was her predecessor, whose name is now escaping me. But
I think the steps are important, Craig. So go ahead and get that information if available.
Yeah,
okay.
even if it was before her time, she would know who to reach out to, I would think.
Yeah.
It started at any rate.
Yep. Okay.
And so that's, I'm not sure if we're going to be, or you're going to be prepared to make a recommendation on that time, but we will certainly, hopefully we'll move forward enough to reach some accomplishment next week.
Okay, some focus that I'd like to have the committee get on is when the planning committee is meeting, so that we make sure if we can be prepared at certain key points that we are. Now, their regular committee meeting is next week on the 7th from my calendar.
Correct.
And so we wouldn't necessarily do anything at that meeting, but their study session is the 21st. We have 2 meetings before that. And at that planning study session, Tagi, am I correct? Are you planning on giving them kind of a tutorial on this to bring them up to speed on how we came up with this fee?
Well, we haven't come up with a fee, and those are public meetings. And what we talked was this would be more of a update than what the final fee is and where we are in the process, and hopefully let them know that we could be coming at some point in the following month in November for them to put this topic on their agenda.
I believe I've talked to Paul, and we've kind of, come up with an idea that he would call together a special planning commission for the hearing on the recommendation to the planning commission, so that we don't interfere in their normal, because they seem to have a full plate usually when they're going into these meetings, and we sure want to allow enough time for them to understand.
That would be great.
Oh, did we just lose Brian?
Yeah, we just lost him.
So, guys, obviously, some of you are aware, but so is Rick still on the call?
Yes.
So obviously, with Rick leaving, I'm going to be working with Adam and John Kennedy, to handle the Plan Commission meetings for a bit until we're able to fill his position. So
I got disconnected, Craig. Can you kind of briefly repeat what you just said?
Oh, I was just about to say, with Rick leaving on the 16th, and me needing to work with Adam and John Kennedy going forward until we replace Rick's position, until we fill Rick's position, working with me on managing those meetings. I think it's going to be important to, well, Adam's involved, so that's good, but I think it's maybe important to involve John Kennedy, at least as to listen in on these if he's available, just so he has some more background. But how involved was John last time around? I mean, he was on the Plan Commission, I believe. Is that correct, or I don't know?
John was on the Planning Commission I think it was 3 years ago.
Okay, so that's helpful. So he at least understands the general concept of what we're talking about here?
I believe he does, yes.
He understands it.
Okay, so that's good. So there's at least less of a learning curve with the president of the Plan Commission.
Also, Bob Burleson was on the commission.
Okay.
As well. There was one other individual. There were 3 all total. John Bob,
Gill.
And John
Well,
Gill.
Paul
You're
was
exactly
there,
right.
too. Paul was
Well, yeah,
on the commission.
Paul was on the Plan Commission, but he
Right, he's
is not on the
really-
council, obviously.
Right.
But as far as the currently sitting members of the Plan Commission, John, Bob Burleson,
John
And
Kennedy,
Bro-
John Gill, and Bob
and
Burleson.
John Kennedy, right.
so at least
Correct.
3 of the members, 3 of the 7,
Are already aware of the fee and how it works.
right. Okay, so I mean that'll help with the learning curve a bit.
I think Paul has told me that he's had conversations off and on with them as well, so he's
Okay.
currently bringing them up to speed as well.
Okay.
If I may, the next step legally in the process is to basically amend the comprehensive plan with this zone improvement plan. And the zone improvement plan is much of what has been discussed over these past several meetings. The zone improvement plan has certain minimum requirements. And again, these are the things that would have to be incorporated as an amendment to the comprehensive plan. Those items include a description of the nature and location of existing infrastructure in the impact zone. So that's within the town boundaries. A determination of the current level of service. Establishment of a community level of service. The estimate of the nature and location of development that is expected to occur in the impact zone during the following 10 years. An estimate of the nature, location, and cost of infrastructure that is necessary to provide the community level of service for the development described above in Section 4. The plan must indicate the proposed timing and sequencing of infrastructure installation. And a general description of the sources and amounts of money used to pay for infrastructure during the previous 5 years. So all of those items have to be included in the zone improvement plan, and that zone improvement plan has to be essentially adopted by the Plan Commission as an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And that requires that there be a hearing held by the Plan Commission before it can adopt this amendment to the comprehensive plan. So that's really what I see as the next step in this process.
Yeah, and for us, that means, Adam, that we have to at least have the draft plan completed with all of those items that you just mentioned, and we have started writing them, and but a lot of those items at the last part of it would depend on what that final fee is, so we can make calculations and project future developments, where they are, where they should be. And so there is additional work that has to be done after this fee is set.
Is it, is
Yeah,
it
go ahead.
possible? Is it possible after the fact, Adam, to do the same thing, except for right now, sidestep all of the needed plans and or rewrites and or updates? Is it possible that it can be done after the fee is installed?
I'm sorry, Brian, I'm not exactly sure what your question is.
You just
What
went
I
through
described as the zone improvement plan does not require a fee calculation. It doesn't require that the fee be calculated as part of this zone improvement plan. So the zone improvement plan must be adopted as part of the comprehensive plan before the ordinance that establishes the impact fee can be adopted by the town council.
that was my question. The basis for my question is, what do we have to accomplish these zone separations in writing before we can go forward to actually vote on the fee installation?
Yes, I think it will be necessary to establish the zoning districts before there can be the adoption of the ordinance establishing the fees.
That's exactly what I was looking for.
And I would go one step further. If there's going to be more than a single impact zone, then again, the code requires that there be a description of the nature and location of existing infrastructure in each impact zone. So it would be necessary to determine what those impact zones are if they're going to be more than one, if it's going to be more than just the municipal corporate boundaries of the town, then the zone improvement plan, which is going to have to become part of the comprehensive plan, must describe all of the infrastructure in each zone. So that would have to be done pretty promptly, pretty soon here in this process, long before the impact fee ordinance can be even considered by the town council.
So basically, it's added a whole bunch of requirements before we can even consider a fee.
Again, I don't know if it's requirements. The zone improvement plan must contain a lot of those items that have been discussed and as part of the planning by the Arts Group and by First Group. It has to describe the existing infrastructure. It has to describe or determine what the current level of service is. It has to provide an estimate of the nature and location of the developments expected to occur during the next 10 years. And if you recall, during the presentation, a lot of that was included as part of these presentations.
I think a lot of that work is going to be done. It's just a matter, I think what you're doing is you're just splitting up the document into the sections that are required in order to provide the information for each zone. Basically, you're taking the information, the type of information that we've been provided, and you're separating it into the zones.
Yeah, a lot of that information is.
It's the way that the information is packaged and presented in the zone improvement plan.
Right. As a single right now, we have it. And if it is going to be a split, that is an additional work for us that would take a while. And but the writing for these sections, the narratives, that has to be done, and that is our fear is that we may not be able to finish it before the ordinance is adopted, and if our goal is to finish it this year. And that's what we are going to have to focus. And then that's what becomes so critical that these fees are finalized, because we need to write about them. We need to project future needs. All of that are governed by the fee that is established by the committee.
Craig, that's why it's important when you talk to Noblesville to get the details as to why originally they did it, and then after they consolidated, and when they did it, what time period. That'll have a lot to do with how we approach this. Don't you all agree?
Right, but I guess what I would correct, and I think what I'm trying to convey is that you have to split the baseline information out that's been presented to us into the zones. So you have to say, this project's in this zone, this project's in this zone, this project is whatever, and then the anticipated costs in this zone are this, the anticipated costs in this zone are this. And so basically they have to split out all the information they've already put together for us into the zones and recalculate everything based on that.
But it's still going to take time. It's going to take time to put that information in together, and time being of the essence, it would take a longer period and move our ending date estimate ahead.
Correct. The other thing to consider, and I was talking to Tagi and Denny about this yesterday, was the reason why I'm anticipating that the reason why Noblesville combined their zones is because it offers them flexibility in where they can utilize the funds generated, and that basically, the trips generated have an impact on different parts of town. So if someone is going to a shopping center on 41, they're coming from their home and going to a shopping center on 41 and then going back to their home, they're impacting areas that are in both zones. So the argument could be made that, you should have the ability to spend some of the money generated within the commercial zone in areas that are, within the non-commercial zones, if you will, the roads that are in the non-commercial zones, because those are impacted by that trip. That
was my original question.
Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, that would be, I think, a reason why you would only want to have one zone. It's similar to how communities handle their economic development zones, how they handle TIF districts, things like that. TIF districts are a little bit different because you might want to have specific areas set aside, but there are cases where you're allowed to set up a zone, and a lot of communities are opting for including their whole community in those zones because it allows flexibility in how those funds are used, and it spreads the impact. It understands that the impact is spread out around the community, not just in that one place.
That's why I originally asked the question, and Tagi said you're not allowed to spend the money generated by a zone anywhere else but in that zone. And that gives you too many rules. If you did something for 41, you build a shopping center on 41 along somewhere, and then the people are going to move into 2 or 3 developments east of town. You can't spend the money to fix 93rd going east.
Right. Exactly.
You're going to have to spend the money on 41.
Exactly. That's what. That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
That makes it prohibitive, as far as that doesn't make sense unless there's some underlying reason to put these zones in.
Right. Exactly. And I'm going to guess that when I talk to Sarah, that's one of the answers I'm going to get. Is that
more than likely the money.
We had so many zones set up. It was, they had so many zones set up, and their community, just like any other community, their community has evolved in the way in which it's developed over the years. Back in 20 years ago, the city of Noblesville probably was just beginning to talk about the concept of what's the road that leads out to the road that leads out to Hamilton Town Center and the amphitheater and all that. I can't think what the name of it is off the top of my head, but 238, if I'm not mistaken, is a highway that leads out of downtown Noblesville and goes out to that area. I don't know if anybody anticipated the level at which that, would develop when they initially started all this. And that area has helped feed other parts of town, in terms of its ability to provide for their needs in other parts of town. So I'm anticipating that's what she's going to say. But obviously I'll collect that information and let you guys know.
Yeah, it seems like there would have to be a pretty compelling story as far as why you would want to separate the town into different segments, given where St. John is sitting today.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely agreed, Joan.
Yeah.
All right, well, anything else anybody needs desperately to discuss at this 2.5 hour point? 3 hour point.
I'm sorry, can I just ask one more question then?
No,
So
Joan,
on the,
no. Go ahead.
on the zone improvement plan, that needing to be adopted as part of and amended for the comprehensive plan, is that a through the planning commission, and is it like a first reading, second reading? So is that like a two meeting process? And then does that have to go to the town council for adoption? And is that a first reading, second reading, and makes that 2 meetings, or?
Right. So the short answer is that it's an amendment to the comprehensive plan. This amendment to the comprehensive plan must be done prior to the adoption of the fee impact ordinance. So consider it a prerequisite, if you will. And so the amendment is generally initiated by the Plan Commission. It would have to be considered by the Plan Commission following a public hearing. So a hearing would have to be set. There would have to be notice given. There would have to be an advertisement for that hearing. And then the Plan Commission, following the hearing, can approve that amendment. And then once it's been approved, the Plan Commission then certifies that to the town council. So it goes from the Plan Commission to the town council, who ultimately would then approve the amendment to the comprehensive plan. It does not require like you said, it's not a first or second reading by the Plan Commission. It would simply be, it would be an agenda item. It would be the subject of a hearing before the Plan Commission, and then the Plan Commission could then vote to approve it following that hearing.
So theoretically,
So
it's done in one meeting.
I'm sorry?
Theoretically, it could be done in one public meeting.
Well, for the amendment to the comprehensive plan, yes. But there's also a separate requirement for the adoption of the ordinance. And the fee impact ordinance also has to go through the Plan Commission because it gets adopted like a zoning ordinance. And so as a zoning ordinance, it goes to the Plan Commission. They would have to have a public hearing on the fee impact ordinance, and then the Plan Commission would certify that to the town council. So there's two different things we're discussing, one being the amendment to the comprehensive plan, the second being the adoption of the fee impact ordinance.
And that is a sequential process, right? So Planning Commission, Town Council, Planning Commission, Town Council. So we're at least 2 months out from even being able to get to an approval of this road impact fee. So I think, Tagi, the last agenda that we talked about, where we said, hey, what's the critical path look like? This this step right here of amending to the comprehensive plan was not included in that critical path that we talked about last time, I don't think.
You're exactly correct.
And so I think we have to go back and brush that off and say, okay, go back and redo that plan to say, now here's the critical path. And
Until Craig reports back to us next week about what he found out from Noblesville, I think we're in a holding pattern currently. Don't you agree?
well, no matter what, it's got to be amendment to the comprehensive plan. And that two-step, I mean, those are two steps that have to take place, whether we
No.
have one zone or two, correct, Adam?
Adam, it's only if you break it up into zones. If you leave the town intact, there's no need to have a public hearing about the comprehensive plan, is there?
No, that's incorrect, Brian. It doesn't matter whether there's a single zone or multiple zones. It is a prerequisite to the adoption of an impact fee ordinance that there be an amendment to the comprehensive plan and basically by this zone improvement plan during the 12 months prior to, anytime during the 12 months prior to the adoption of the fee impact ordinance.
So I misunderstood that. Joan is correct that there's going to have to be two meetings in reality. One's going to be an amendment to the comprehensive plan, and the other one is going to be a public hearing on the actual impact fee.
Can I ask a clarification question, please? And I know Joan asked that in our experience in the past, and I want to make sure that Adam hears me fully and he can answer it fully. Is when we go to Plan Commission, there are two documents that has to be approved by the Plan Commission. One is the resolution for that compliance or amendment to the comprehensive plan or the zone improvement plan. And the other one is a certification that says, yes, it is Plan Commission certifies that this plan or this road impact fee is in compliance with the comprehensive plan. Our experience has been that both of these actions are done one after another, and that's what I asked, can that be done in one meeting? I want to just make sure that Adam clarifies this one way or another.
Yes. So I'm going to provide you with the code sections if you wish to take notes, but 3674 1312 A provides that a unit may not adopt an impact fee ordinance unless the unit has adopted a comprehensive plan for the geographic area, which it has, and the section 1318A says that a unit may not adopt an impact fee ordinance unless the unit has prepared or substantially updated a zone improvement plan for each impact zone during the immediately preceding 1 year period. So, as I alluded earlier, it doesn't matter if there's a single zone or if there are multiple zones. As a prerequisite to the adoption of the ordinance, the zone improvement plan must be adopted as part of the comprehensive plan. That's what I alluded to earlier as far as what's required to be included in that. It has to be initiated by the Plan Commission. There has to be a hearing before the Plan Commission. Now, the impact fee ordinance, which would be the document that establishes all of the fees that are going to be imposed and collected by the town, that also has to go through the Plan Commission because it's adopted in the same manner as a zoning ordinance. And that comes from Section 1311B, which says if the legislative body of a unit has a planning and zoning jurisdiction over the entire geographic area, an ordinance adopted under this section shall be adopted in the same manner that zoning ordinances are adopted under the 600 series. And under the 600 series, zoning ordinances have to go through the Plan Commission, be heard, be set for hearing, and then ultimately certify that to the town council. And then once it's adopted by the town council, as you know, it doesn't go into effect for 6 months after the date of adoption. So Tagi, if your question is, could the Plan Commission have a hearing on both the zone improvement plan and the amendment to the comprehensive plan at the same meeting that the Plan Commission is going to make a recommendation regarding the fee impact ordinance? I submit that that's possible, but again, the concern I have, it goes back to section 1318 that basically requires that before the town council can adopt the impact fee ordinance, it has to have adopted and updated that zone improvement plan. So, but yes, the short answer is I believe the Plan Commission could do both, probably at the same meeting, have hearings on both matters. So there would be 2 hearings held during the same meeting. I think that's possible. I'm not sure it's advisable, but I think it's possible.
Can the town council do the same and approve both at the same time?
I believe that if the town council adopts a resolution approving the zone improvement plan prior to its adoption of the fee impact ordinance, that would comply with law. Because the adoption of the resolution approving the amendment to the comprehensive plan will have occurred prior to the adoption of the ordinance.
So separate agenda items, one following the other, would be permissible in your opinion?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
One comment I have on that is that, are you sure you would want to do that though? Because you got to give the community time to digest all that's happening. And if you do one right after the other, you could be, and this is stating it mildly, raising some eyebrows on why are you trying to do this so fast? We know why you want to get it through so fast, because time is money here. But you still have to worry about transparency issues.
Well, then we could basically have a special town council meeting a week apart.
Yes, I think that would be better.
Well, right now we're in the planning stages as to how we're going forward. I think that's a consideration that we've got to consider seriously, and I would bring it to the council. I'm sure they'd have no objection because of the importance of the fee.
Okay.
Right.
I have one follow-up question to your statement that it is not advisable to have the two documents approved or adopted at one meeting.
Right, so,
What's
so-
the reason for that advice that you're saying?
right, so anytime there is an amendment to the comprehensive plan, the final step in that process is that the town clerk treasurer has to record that with the Lake County recorder. So as a lawyer, if I were going to try to challenge, the legal validity of the steps taken that are required, the prerequisites to the impact fee ordinance adoption, if the amendment to the comprehensive plan had not yet been recorded before the town council took formal vote to adopt it, that could be grounds for a legal challenge, in my opinion. And so for that reason, I would recommend that the amendment to the comprehensive plan by the zone improvement plan be completed in its entirety, which legally I think it has to be recorded to complete that process before the town council then adopts the impact fee ordinance. That's why I suggested it would not be advisable to do both at the same time.
You've made your point.
No. That would basically, Brian, the only way, if that is the case, the only way we can push this process along would be in a special meeting for the plan commission. And I don't know how long.
Followed by
the reasonable time.
followed by a special meeting for the town council.
Yeah, and in between, between the two plan commission meetings, we have to give enough time for the clerk treasurer to record that
Exactly.
amendment. And I don't know how long that is normally take in the town of St. John.
Adam, that's just what, a trip down to the Lake County office?
Yes, so whatever, right, once it's been approved by resolution by the town council, that document would have to simply be taken to the recorder's office and, presented for recording. There would be fees paid. And
So that would be,
basically,
that would be within 12 hours of the time the council passed.
it could conceivably, yes.
Okay.
This was something new, and it's going to make the situation much more, I think, condensed. Adam, I think what I would like to suggest that perhaps me, you, and Craig get together. And I know Rick is still here, maybe he should attend too, at least. And sort of pin down some of these dates, absolutely, and then send it to the committee and let them know. And hopefully before the next meeting, one last item that we have to sort of guess. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I think that's a wise choice, Tommy.
Yeah, is at least I'm trying to check all the boxes. One last box to check. You're doing
a bang up job. Cooperatively, we seem to be still semi on track. We had one more step thrown in we weren't counting on, but we've approached it already, and now we're moving ahead with plans to solve it.
Yeah, and because the plan commission meets only once a month,
That's
Oh.
why I suggested a special meeting, and Paul more or less approved and said, yeah, I think that's a good idea, and he can put it together. So,
yeah, and we want to be, what Donna said, we want to make sure that we are sensitive, especially if it's going to be a special meeting. That means a lot of people could come in, and we want to be sensitive to their needs. You've been in the previous time meetings, and not to, for them to feel that we are pushing this process without any regards, and so there has to be some time between the meetings.
I agree with you
Yeah.
and Don both, yes.
Yeah, I think we got to get it on a, calendarize it. What's the critical path, especially, the requirements for, because we're having a public hearing, and when does that have to be noticed and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, we want
Agreed.
to make sure that it comes across that this is all a very planned process and not something that we feel like we've got to jam through at the last minute. We do not want that.
right.
Out of curiosity, the last time this was done, what sector of the population did most of the objections come from? Was it residents versus developers, or where'd it come from?
I would guess, and unless Taggy knows better, the planning commission did their job, and I remember going to the public hearing, but that was the end of it. It never went before the town council
Because,
because the town council didn't want to hear of it.
Well, the plan commission never approved it.
Well, because the town council didn't want to hear it.
Right. But yeah, in terms of technical, it was never sort of left the plan commission.
Correct.
did objections come in from the community, though, about it, or was it all the town council that was objecting?
It was primarily the public hearing had a lot of builders and or developers in
Okay.
the audience, and they spoke.
Okay, I just wanted to know what to
Do we
expect.
know the date of that meeting that we might be able to review the minutes?
Taggy'd have to help you with that.
Okay.
I will have to ask the town. I know it was recorded,
I don't remember it. Yes, it was recorded.
and we do not have a copy of that recording. But we did also have a special meeting with the developers. I think you attended it, Brian.
Yes, I did.
And that meeting, again, maybe I'm biased, but my sense, or the developers were extremely nice. I thought that was, in my opinion, went better than what I thought it would go.
Taggy, can you at least get us an approximate date so we could have the town clerk look for the meeting or the minutes of that public hearing?
I can send that. I know that we have that. Yes,
Okay, good.
we have that date.
I can tell you-
This is Rick. I'll get that to you or to Craig. I'll get the meeting minutes to you so you can distribute it to everyone
That
from
would be
from
great.
that Plan Commission
Thank you,
public hearing.
That's terrific, Rick.
I can tell you, my recollection is that the builders in general would prefer that the fee be lower, and the public in general would prefer that the fee be higher. So
Why
that's,
did that surprise us, Jack?
yeah, no, that's not, so we just have to find that happy medium where everybody's satisfied.
Okay.
You're absolutely right, Jack. And
Yeah. Yes,
that-
he did. I believe you were in attendance as well, Jack.
I think Jack was on the committee, weren't you,
Yeah.
Jack?
Yeah, I was on the committee and I was at the meeting, yes.
Okay. All right. So, Tagi, you're gonna get us a critical path after you sit down with everybody and figure that all out. And then Rick, you offered to get us the minutes of that
Correct.
meeting from
Correct, yeah.
the past. And anybody else perceive a need we need to discuss before we adjourn?
Next meeting, October 8th.
Sounds good,
Okay. Great.
unless
Great.
there's any objections. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you very much for your time, everybody.